Hi, it's Vex, and today we want to talk about these cards. Well, specifically these two cards and how the topic of today's story came up. So, with COVID restrictions easing up, I decided to go to my local game store and play a little Magic. And then I ran to the Wombo combo of Junji, the Midnight Sky, and Shieldred Whispering One. I was not playing this deck. Somebody else was. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Until I realized that when these two are in play or in the graveyard, it's like impossible to get rid of them both. Because, let's read what they do. Junji, the Midnight Sky, a brand new card, 3 black, Flying Menace. When it dies, choose one. Each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life. I've been on the back end of that many times. It sucks. Or put target non-dragon creature card from your graveyard onto a battlefield under your control. You lose 2 life. Well, a nice non-dragon card is a Phyrexian Praetor, Shieldred, the Whispering One, 5 black, Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So, my opponent did not play these on the fair. Maybe played Junji on the fair, sacrificed it, entombed Shieldred, brought Shieldred back. 1 turn cycle later, no one can get rid of Shieldred. Guess what comes back? Junji comes back. Now, if you kill them both, they'll both be in the graveyard. Junji will trigger, you get Shieldred back. Shieldred will get Junji back again. You see how the chain keeps going. And then another player at the table said, hey, where's the graveyard hate? And I'm like, it's in there, but my deck videos, I usually say play at least 1 graveyard hate. After this game, because I used to play with my friends, my play group, only one player has a lot of graveyard shenanigans, but nowadays with new Magic, every deck had graveyard shenanigans. I noticed that the other 2 players who aren't graveyard decks had some graveyard cards. So I think graveyard hate now, instead of 1 piece, my new rule is 3 pieces at the least of graveyard hate, because it's just, I treat it as another piece of removal that I have to incorporate into the deck. I do have a stack of example graveyard hate cards. Because Wizard is printing so many incidental graveyard cards that do such good things for the graveyard, that it sucks that I have to take out 2 more slots in my deck, put 2 graveyard hate cards in the deck. It is what it is. I think it's just so necessary. That game just taught me, hey, the guy with the graveyard can just do whatever they want and just bring these 2 back over and over again. We kept sacrificing creatures. It was 3 versus 1, but the graveyard person had so much recursion that it was just unbeatable. Speaking about incidental graveyard shenanigans, another game I played is I played my Ishin deck right here. You can see a deck tech right there against an Umbrus deck. If you have seen my Umbrus deck tech, Umbrus likes things in exile. So when I started, I was like, oh, I got Ishin. Ishin doesn't do that much graveyard stuff. However, looking through the deck, Ishin does do some incidental graveyard things, as I mentioned. For instance, Anger. When it's in a graveyard, everything gets haste. Sun Titan, bring things back from graveyard. Takenuma. I didn't even realize that it's graveyard because it's a brand new card. Brings things back from a graveyard. I have Kroxa, which escapes from the graveyard, and Rashaka Debaser, which steals things from other people's graveyards, but can encore back from your graveyard. So 5 graveyard cards. Even though this deck doesn't do much graveyard stuff, there are just cards that do graveyard shenanigans. So and then I have my Hinata deck, which actually the graveyard player had Bajuga bogged and bogged my 1 card that really matters, Past in Flames. I only have 2 cards that matter in the deck that do graveyard shenanigans. Past in Flames and Faithless Looting. And they hit my Past in Flames, and that was just a great move for them. As you can see, the graveyard hate, even against decks that don't play graveyard stuff, like in my Hinata deck, I still got hit by the graveyard hate. So let's actually take a look at what graveyard hate cards that I like to include. These are, I guess, the standard cards that I'll include in my deck techs and my decks because they're very powerful. There are other cards that do good things, are good incidental graveyard hate cards, but these are the cards that I recommend including. And again, definitely include at least 3 pieces now, maybe 4. Depends on how the future holds. My stance will change. Hopefully they print more graveyard hate type cards that are attached to other type cards, so you don't have to dedicate a slot. So let's look at these cards. In white, we have our new Lion Sash, which is great. It's a kind of like a Scavenging Ooze on equipment. 1 in white. Exile target creature card, or exile target card from a graveyard. If it's permanent, put +1/+1 counter on it, and then it's reconfigured 2. And then the equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on Lion Sash. So white is really good in graveyard hate. Black is really good too. You got Rest in Peace. This just nukes all graveyards. So if your deck doesn't have that much graveyard synergy, just do a rest in peace and nuke all graveyards. And the cool thing is, for decks that don't rely on a graveyard that much, like my Hinata deck right here, only has these Faithless Looting and Past in Flames. Right there, I'm gonna include Rest in Peace as a piece of graveyard hate. I mean, some people might get bitter, like, oh, just nuke my entire graveyard strategy. I'm like, well, look, you know what you're playing, and you know the risk. Rest in peace. And the brand new card, Farewell. Another card from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Farewell, 4 white. Choose one or more, exile all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or graveyards. Nukes all graveyards. Again, if you're a graveyard deck, you're a non-graveyard deck, Farewell is so good because you don't have to choose that mode. So I think Farewell is insane in that spot. Blue, there isn't much blue graveyard hate. Usually you use the Time Twister effects to reshuffle decks, but we do have one card. I'm including my Niv Mizzet deck, Clear the Mind. 2 in a blue, very expensive for graveyard hate card. Target player shuffles a graveyard into a library, draw a card. So it doesn't get rid of the problematic permanents by exiling it, but it is a cantrip, and you just make them shuffle back in. Black is very good in graveyard hate. I love black because you got new Dauthi Voidwalker from Modern Horizons 2. Black, Shadow. If a card will be put in an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile with a void counter on it. And the cool part is now you get to play that stuff because you can sack it, choose an exile card, and opponent owns with a void counter on it. You may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. So if somebody else has Dauthi Voidwalker and exile something, you can use your Dauthi Voidwalker to steal their stuff, as long as it has a void counter. Speaking of Bajuka Bog that we talked about before, very good. ETB, exile target player's graveyard. Now, if you're a graveyard deck but you want to hate on other graveyard decks, Leyline the Void does a great job because you could play this if you have this in your opening hand, and then if a card would put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile instead. Now, that makes the dying triggers of cards not happen, but dying triggers of tokens happens because it says if a card will be put in an opponent's graveyard, not a token. Tokens do go to a graveyard before they disappear. This Rest in Peace is different because it says if a card or token will be put in the graveyard from anywhere, exile instead. So no dice trigger, period. Leyline of the Void does have creature dice trigger, so it's pretty interesting there. Red, I haven't found very much red or any red. We can move on to green. Let's make some space here. Green's got good graveyard hate. Scavenging Ooze, I include that in most, if not all, of my green decks. Scavenging Ooze is super powerful graveyard hate. It is a little slow. Sometimes you need a one shot on big time. But again, with the Junji combo here, you could just shield your target Junji, then you could just Scavenging Ooze it away. So it gives you a good silver bullets there. We have new Modern Horizons 2 Endurance right there. You just tuck the graveyard underneath their deck. Again, like Clear the Mind, it doesn't solve the problem, doesn't get rid of it forever, but at least gets rid of the graveyard. And then you have Ground Seal. It doesn't get rid of the graveyard. 1 in a green. When ETBs draw cards, so it's cantripping. And then cards and graveyards can't be a target spells or abilities, so again, you can't just target it, bring it back from the graveyard, and such like that. You have multicolored cards, Rakdos Charm, right here. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard. And it's modal, so I really like this card. This card is very good because it's very modal. Destroy target artifact where each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. So token deck, with 20 tokens, deals 20 damage to its controller. It's great. You have Ashiok Dreamweaver. Very good graveyard hate card. It is a planeswalker, very vulnerable, but does have these spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause their controllers to search their library. So, it's got more text, and then you can exile graveyards there, mill and exile. Now these are colorless ones. These are the best of the best colorless. There's lots of colorless ones. I think Soul Guardian Lantern is the best because, as I said before, most decks do incorporate the graveyard somehow, some way. Soul Guardian Lantern can just exile one problematic card right away, so you never have to see it again. Then if you leave it on the board, you can sack it, exile each opponent's graveyard, keep your graveyard so you can do your own graveyard shenanigans. Or you can pay 1 tap, draw a card, just in case you need to make it a cantrip. Relic Progenitus right here, slow way to exile cards from graveyards. You tap, target player exiles a card from their graveyard. You exile a card from your graveyard if somebody's trying to reanimate your stuff. Or 1 sack, 9 sack, 1 exile it, exile all cards from all graveyards, draw a card, it's a little cantrip. A new card from Crimson Vow, Lantern of the Lost. Kind of like a hybrid between those. When ETBs, exile target card from a graveyard. And then you could pay 1 tap, exile Lantern of the Lost, exile cards from all graveyards. So I would only play these 2 if I really don't need my graveyard. Soul Guide Lantern, I think it's going to make a staple. Every deck's going to have it. I just can't, I'm not going to have this graveyard shenanigans happen to me again. I've learned my lesson. You also have Grafdigger's Cage, usually played in the more CH meta, but Grafdigger's Cage, again, creature cards can't enter the battlefield from graveyards or libraries. Players can't cast cards in graveyards or libraries. So, excellent there. And then a land, Scavenger Grounds. I include this in decks that just don't have access to these kind of effects. Definitely not in any black-white decks. They have enough effects there, but maybe like a mono-red deck. Definitely need a mono-blue deck. Sometimes in a blue-white deck, I would include it. Not a black-green deck and such like that. Once you have more colors, you have more options. So again, Farewell is such a good option. I think this is going to be an EDH staple really soon. But before we go, let's actually talk about a deck that really uses a lot of, utilizes its graveyard. I can't say things correctly. On my Croxa deck here, let's get the cards here. My Croxa deck, I've taken all the graveyard shenanigan cards out of my Croxa deck, which is a discard deck, but a graveyard deck. Croxa itself is a card that can go in graveyard because it can escape. Right there, we have Squee, Shenanigans, return from your hand from your graveyard. Palaces, return a creature to your hand. Ox of Gonas can do the escape mechanic. Chain of Nightmare lets you cast creatures from the graveyard. Of course, Grafdigger's Cage will get rid of that one. Ground Seal would not get rid of that one. Sepulchral Primordial. It steals from other players' graveyards, right? And then you got your reanimation. Look at all this reanimation right here. We have like up to 7 reanimation spells we could reanimate from our opponent's graveyard as well on some of them. So that's a bunch of graveyard synergies. It's 7 + 5, 12. Underworld Breach casts tons of spells from your graveyard. That's 13 cards right there. We do have Graveyard Hate in our Croxa deck. We do have the Soul Guide Lantern here, which is probably this one right here I'm using as an example. Dothy Voidwalker, Rakdos Charm, Scavenger Grounds. So we do have those cards that I mentioned earlier to hit graveyards because I am making them discard so the graveyard is a tool. So as you can see, like a heavy graveyard deck would get hurt a lot, but even just like the Hanada deck or the Ishin deck that has some graveyard synergies still can get hurt. The Hanada deck not that much because I only have 1 card. It just happened it happens to be in the graveyard. I happen to get Bajuka bogged, but that my Hanada is definitely gonna rest in peace right there. That's gonna hose so many good decks. Anyways, tell me what you think about graveyards and EDH. How you think graveyards are just so strong in EDH. Leave your comment below there. But before we go, don't forget to use my TCG Player affiliate link in the description below. Give the video a thumbs up, smash the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to be alerted for new videos. And as always, have your graveyard hate and have a wonderful day.